how they paid you, so we can ensure that you've been paid correctly. The big thing you need to understand is they don't have to show you the information. They don't have to show it to the employee. They have to show it to the government, and we ask. So when you get out there, it seems like something funny is going on with your employer, and you believe you're not getting paid right. Don't try and get the information from them. Past just asking. If they're not cooperating right up front, don't bother with them anymore. Don't make them mad. Let us do it for you. Okay? That's what we're here for. Also, if they're not keeping track of the number of hours you're working, any of your employers, keep them yourself. Any record that the employer doesn't have, we'll go to you to find out what those records are, right? So if you think you're not getting paid right, start keeping track of it any way you want, on a calendar, notebook paper, whatever you want. Anything that's somewhat accurate, we're going to go with that, and that's as good as gold for you, all right? So just something to be aware of there. Page 13 has two very important terms on it. The work week, which is the basis for all pay in federal law. It's always based on the work week. And the second one is hours worked, right? If you work it, they have to pay for it, right? If they don't want you to work it, they have to tell you to stop, okay? They just can't give you a vague instruction of, all right, work until you're done and then leave. Well, your idea of what's done may be different from your idea of what's done, right? So if you ended up working 10 hours until you thought it was done, you worked 6 hours till you thought it was done, he has to pay you for 10 hours, right? If they don't want you to work it, they need to tell you, only work 6 hours, okay? Basic things like that. Then we have a little bit on how to compute overtime pay. Page 16 talks about enforcement. That's us, right? We'll come in, we'll do an investigation. If you file a complaint telling us you don't think you were paid right, we're not going to look at your employment. We're going to look at everybody employed by that company's employment. We're not going to fix just one problem. We're going to fix the whole big problem, okay? And that includes, we'll look to see if they've been investigated in the past, and if they have, there's probably penalties of some sort that employer will suffer because of that, okay? You see on page 17, the recovery of back wages. If you haven't been paid correctly, we will do our best to get you that pay, all right? Then we get to pages 18 and 19. Here's a list of all the laws that our office enforces. And the ones that make difference to you folks who are going to be on these H-1B visas is, you can see it's the last one, the last bullet point on page 19. Labor applications to employ aliens in specialty occupations and as fashion models of distinguished merit and ability, right? It's a funny little provision there in the law that high-tech things, like typically H-1B employees are programmers, you know? They're either writing code or putting together networks or something like that, but it also includes, by a strange fluke, fashion models. Beautiful women, beautiful men, right? It's interesting. You lump together electronic stuff, getting computers work with models. I don't know. I have yet to do an investigation having to do with models. I'm looking forward to that day, right? And then lastly, there's a little warning on the bottom of page 20 that is particularly for employers. If they don't think we are enforcing fair, they can make a complaint against us there, right? And that's our sprint through the law that we enforce most of the time, okay? Now, this law is going to apply to everyone that we do an investigation on, right? But if you're here on one of these H-1B visas, a whole extra set of laws are going to apply to your employment there. And that's what's in the extra package we've got. So let's look through that. So the general idea on these H-1B provisions of the law is that employers in America have told the government, we can't find American citizens to do this job. We don't have, with H-1B, it's people of particular knowledge, right? It tends to be, like I said before, it tends to be computer programming, hardware, stuff like that, putting together these big networks. Although it can be anything that qualifies, but it usually requires a great deal of education to get the job. Doctors often fall into it also, okay? The employer has told the government, we can't find people to do this very difficult job. we'd like to bring in someone from outside of America to do this. So they'll contact, somehow they'll get a hold of you. You've made your, they put a job announcement out there. You'll find out about it. You'll apply. And then we get a visa for you. And the visa says that you will come to America on this H-1B visa. And on that visa, it lists who you will be working for. That's the only person you're allowed to work for, legally. Okay? The company is going to bring you in, and they've told the government all this stuff. You can see this is fact sheet number 62, right? They're going to have what they call a labor conditions application for your employment, right? So let's say that you're going to be a software programmer, for example. I nailed it, did I? Yes. Okay. It says you're going to be a software programmer. It says where you're going to work. You're going to work in Glendale, California. Okay? And it will say a number of different rates of pay. It'll say the prevailing rate of pay is $72,000 a year. And then it will say the actual rate of pay is going to be $78,000 a year. Okay? The prevailing rate, that's a statistical thing that the employer came up with off of databases that says in this industry, if we want to employ this person, we have to pay $72,000. That's the prevailing rate. The actual rate is the rate that that company has been paying for that job. Okay? Now the law requires that they have to pay whichever of those two rates is the highest. Sweet, huh? So you're going to make $78,000 if you're employed on that labor conditions application, and you're going to be employed in, what did I say, Glendale, California, right? It's very specific. It's based on location, because all locations are different, right? If you were going to work in Grand Forks, North Dakota, to get a person to do that job there, they might only have to pay $42,000. So it depends. If you come in on this on this LCA saying you're going to work in Glendale, they can't then have you work in Manhattan, Kansas. They have to have you at the place that's listed on that LCA. Okay? So they filed this LCA and they've certified that everything that's on there is true. They tell you what the required rate weight is going to be. They have to say that if they employ you and they employ an American in the same job, that both of you are going to get the same labor conditions. You're going to make the same amount of money. You're going to have the same benefits, as close as they can get. Okay? They say that they're not going to employ you because the workers who normally do that work are out on strike. Right? They're employing you because they have a long-term need for this, not because there's some sort of labor dispute. All right? I'm just going through the bullet points on here, right? There's not a union bargaining representative. They have to give you a copy of that LCA. All right? So when you start working for them, they'll hand you something and it has all these numbers on it, right? And you can see then what it is you're going to be paid. Okay? They're not going to allow you to pay the employer's fees. There are fees that the employer has to pay the government to be allowed to bring people in. It's visa fees, things like that. They usually end up being, well, depending on how quickly the employer got these things done, they can be between $500 and $1,500. And they're not allowed to charge that to you. That's stuff that the employer has to pay. It's their cost to do it. Okay? If you decide after you've worked there for